Hi, I'm attorney Andrew Thomas. Welcome to the Deposition. Today I'm joined by our senior attorney here at ATTLaw, Nathan Lewis. Known you for over 20 years now. We went to law school together. Now we've been practicing for a long time together. Nathan has a varied background, an amazing attorney. We're lucky to have him here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So yeah, we graduated law school together about 20 years ago now. I've been practicing for 20 years. I started my career out basically pure trial work, jury trials, criminal defense, family law, taking on personal injury cases. And now I've switched my focus to immigration with immigration courts, USCIS side of things of that nature.
So Nathan does a lot of our consultations. He does a lot of our legal work. Obviously here, he helps manage the legal work here. Obviously we've had a lot of changes in immigration law.
Yeah, Trump has changed up some things.
I mean, this is a highly politicized field. So when you think about immigration law, it's different than criminal and family law. I mean, those can remain relatively static. New administration comes in, yeah. Family law is the same, criminal law might be the same, there might be changes here and there.
Right.
Immigration, on the other hand, we see that change administration to administration as just their agendas change.
Right.
So I want to ask you, what are some of the big things that you've seen have changed just in this last month since President Trump was inaugurated?
Bigger changes from the court side of things are that under President Biden, based on various factors, if you're in immigration court facing deportation, you could actually sometimes dismiss your case, so you're no longer facing deportation. That is now gone. Under Trump's policy is you have to basically prosecute the entire deportation case from beginning to end, no dismissals of cases. From the USCIS side, I would say TPS going away is a big one. Right now, it's primarily the Venezuelan TPS that was set to expire in April.
Yeah.
There's also a second round of Venezuelan TPS that has no announcement yet, but almost certainly will be expiring in September. You have El Salvador, various other Central American countries that probably not going to be renewed moving forward. So that's a huge one.
I see a lot of this stuff playing hand in hand too, because, while they allow these programs like TPS to continue, or you allow, people in court, let's say they all of a sudden get married to a U.S. citizen and now they have some kind of petition. In the past, we've seen, as those things get approved, judges and even the prosecution, DHS attorneys would agree with you, say, okay, you have something now, we'll allow your client or the respondent to get out of court, not face deportation threats anymore, and be able to pursue something outside of court. That really doesn't matter anymore. I mean, not only TPS going away, but obviously a green card process still exists. But even if you now have a pathway to residency in immigration court, that doesn't mean you're getting out of immigration court.
Nope.
So unfortunately, these cases are having to be litigated from start to finish based on the relief you're traveling under.
Yeah, and from a practical standpoint, it makes no real sense to not allow you to close your immigration court case if you do have that process outside of court. There are, even with the deportation order, there are various, depending on factors, there are ways even to get around that through a marriage-based process. So going through the entire process just adds additional time and expense on to our clients. And
some of the confusing thing to me is, there's a little bit conflicting messaging, because you see with this administration that obviously they want to push deportations. They want to increase the numbers and all of that. But on the other hand, they're making it harder for themselves to reach their numbers, because as the days go by, we know these backlogs in immigration court are just growing. It's not going to get any faster just because of the sheer number of people that are in immigration court and the limited resources of the Executive Office of Immigration Review that oversees the courts. So, we have limited judges. We don't see a mass hiring. In fact, we've seen them reel back the number of judges when we're talking about appellate work and things like that. So that's actually going to make their agenda a little bit more difficult. And they're kind of doing this to themselves a little bit, especially when you see some of the people have these pathways outside of court where they could be seeking
Right.
residency here in the US and they do have that pathway, they're still having to go through the court process, which can take years.
Right. I mean, just take Dallas where we're at right now, the Dallas Immigration Court. It was understaffed for the amount of cases they have already, and now Trump's talking about cutting immigration judges across the board. There's not enough time in the day to process tens of thousands of cases per judge. So by not allowing kind of like the release valve of getting these people out of court that don't really need to be there, because there is a way to get residency and stay here legally. It kind of just, like I said, makes no practical sense for this policy.
So I want to touch on something else that we were kind of talking about before we started here is that I know you've heard, I've heard, and we've seen even with some of our clients or people that come to us just seeking advice that haven't become clients yet, is that the number of people being detained is obviously going up. I mean, you see this on the news, but it's also having a practical effect. From new arrivals to people that aren't so new arrivals,
Right.
are now things are happening.
Yeah.
What have you seen there?
So that's kind of one of the bigger changes I've just kind of seen this week even, is that in the past you would cross the border and claiming asylum or various things. They would either detain you and release you in the country to proceed with your immigration court case, or they would maybe pay a bond, and that's pretty much it. You're out until your court is concluded. Now, to kind of fully answer this question, I have to kind of go a little bit technical. If you want to claim asylum, you have to file for asylum within 1 year of crossing the border, basically. If you do not file your petition in time, it becomes what's called withholding of removal. Similar to asylum, in fact, the same form you file, but very like different legal outcomes and different legal requirements, different protections. For example, with an asylum case, if you win your asylum case, that leads to residency. If you win your withholding case, you still have a deportation order. You're just allowed to remain in the country, probably for the rest of your life. Now, what has been happening at ICE check-ins after you've arrived in the country is that if you did not file your asylum timely, their policy is to detain you and make you do your immigration court while you're detained, which means a much faster immigration court process.
Right. These are expedited.
Expedited, right.
So when we see people not detained, so outside of court, and then they have to show up for their appearances, whether that's in person or via the internet, which they have increasingly allowed, these court cases can take, years? We've represented some clients 5+ years in immigration court. I mean, that's not outside of commonality.
Right.
But when you're talking about someone that's detained and now having to appear by video in front of an immigration judge,
right.
I mean, how fast are those?
60 days. 6 months.
Massive difference.
Yeah.
So you're talking about somebody on the outside who has relief in court and can potentially get an employment authorization document, a work permit, and they're here in the United States. Things in their life may change. Maybe they become eligible for other processes. A lot of things can happen.
Right.
Against somebody who then is detained in immigration court and has just like a rocket docket.
Right.
And we see it start to finish. They'll wrap these things up 60, 90 days, and they could find themselves with a deportation order, can still possibly appeal, but while they are detained. So can't imagine that's a fun place to be while they're going through their hearing. So that has been a massive change.
It's a huge change, and it's basically I believe the strategy is probably obviously to force people to sign for deportation, because he wants to sit in ICE custody in a detention center for 6 months. So yeah, it's a big change, and these are not new arrivals either. These are people that have been here already in the country, going through their court process for 2, 3, 4 years. They've been going to their ICE check-ins like they should, and then all of a sudden they went to the last one like a week or two ago, and ICE puts them in custody. It's very, very different to how things have. Even during Trump's first administration, it's very different than how things have worked in the past. This is a new one.
It is. So now that we know those things, what are some things that you can think about where people can put themselves in a better position to succeed? Because we know a lot of people are facing these situations, and now that we're having this information filter in as to what's happening, there are some things people can do. I mean, what are some things that you could just give as general advice to people?
I mean, the best advice I can give is handle your case. Do not wait 3-4 years after you arrive in the country to talk to an attorney. Arrive in the country, find an attorney. You know you're in the court process. You know you have a pending case. Don't put it off, because it causes it, even beyond being detained by ICE. It just causes massive problems for your case. It could preclude you from getting that work permit that if you don't do things timely. So the best advice: talk to an attorney as soon as you arrive in the country, or very, very shortly thereafter. Do not wait a year, 2 years to start resolving your immigration court case. I mean, the government's not waiting for you. They're prosecuting you from the day you cross the border. So why would you wait?
Yeah, and we're starting to see it speed up. But when people have waited, let's say there's people out there and they've already been here for 2 or 3 years. I mean, we've talked to them today.
Yeah.
Where they had a family member detained after 3 years in the country, and they just went to a simple ICE check-in and detained. If you haven't filed anything after 2 or 3 years, it doesn't mean just don't do anything.
Right.
I mean, the best time to do it is within a year. The second best time is to do it right now.
Exactly. Yeah. The advice remains the same. If you've been holding off talking to an attorney, do it now. You need competent representation for your court process. These are very, if it was easy, you would not need us. I mean, that's the simple fact of it, but it's not easy. It's very complicated. There's lots of rules that you're not going to know. This is not your job. And you haven't gone to school for a long period of time to do this job too either. So like I said, if you've not filed anything yet, file something before they have the option to detain you again, and start fighting your case for real.
So, I mean, that's one of the things I want to talk about our law firm, ATTLaw, is that, obviously you're a trial attorney. You've been doing this since you came out of school. I was doing the same thing. I think a common misconception about attorneys is that they all handle trials and they all work in court. And we know that's not true. But one of the things that we focus on here, and our attorneys from, me and you on down, is that we want attorneys that have that background to handle themselves in court, handle themselves in front of a judge, representing someone against a hostile system. And if they don't have that, we want the attorneys who want that, and want to learn that. And that's the kind of attorneys we have here. I think it's extremely important when you're talking about immigration court, because, I mean, look, the deck is stacked against you already.
Yeah.
You have the prosecution, Department of Homeland Security, and then you have a judge, appointed by the Department of Justice, both government entities, and then you have outside over here.
Well, it's even more worse than that, because take a criminal trial. The judge is part of the judicial branch. The prosecutor is part of the executive branch. In immigration court, the judge and the prosecutor have the same boss. They're both under the executive branch. So it's like you basically have two prosecutors every time you go for an immigration court trial. But getting back to what you said, I would say most attorneys don't go to trial, or not trial attorneys, honestly.
That's true.
The vast majority of attorneys never step foot in a courtroom in their life, and they want it that way. So you definitely need a firm that has experience with that. That's their primary focus, to deal with all these issues you're going to face.
So don't believe all social media attorneys.
Yeah, no, do not believe.
There's some good ones out there,
and
but let's filter it a little bit.
Yeah, there are good ones out there, but if an attorney's making a claim on social media that sounds too good to be true, I've never lost a case in my life, that means they never tried a case in their life.
I mean, obviously, people know us here as immigration court attorneys. We've been doing it for years. Been doing it better than anybody for years. But we've also seen an influx of other types of cases, particularly in the last month. I mean, what are some new stuff that you're seeing?
This has always been the case, but I've seen definitely an increased amount of children trying to get status for their parents.
Yes.
One of the biggest kind of misconceptions in immigration law is all it takes is that my U.S. citizen child reach 21 and then I'm set. I can process through my child, get a green card through my child, and my immigration troubles are over. That is typically only true if you cross the border legally, meaning with a visa, but for the most part. If you cross the border illegally, your process involves filing what's called a 601A waiver, because you have to ask for a pardon for your lawful presence inside the country. Children can't sponsor waivers. So unfortunately, most of these consults ended me saying, basically, I can start your process of your child, but unless you have either a spouse with status or parents with status, I can't complete your process unless you don't leave the country for 10 years. That also kind of leads into some other like child parent immigration issues too. So
yeah. So not only that, but that's been the case in immigration forever. But we're seeing a lot more of those people asking questions, and I understand why. It's just that limited amount where the parent actually has a legal entry and they can prove it. So you got to, it's what you know and what you can prove, right? Denzel Washington training day. There you go. You got to have the visa and you got to be able to show that stamped entry, that you have that legal entry. And now you have the petitioner, the U.S. citizen child. If you don't have that, you're stuck with this unlawful presence, and they just don't have the qualifying relative because, again, child can't help them with that. What I have seen and heard.
Yep.
Okay. So I've seen it on billboards, unfortunately. Things to the nature of you have multiple entries, no problem. You have a U.S. citizen child, 21 years or older, everybody can get residency. I've talked to people in consults that seem to be getting some very interesting and dangerous advice. Have you seen this?
Yes. That has also increased. What this primarily involves is what's called VAWA. VAWA is called the Violence Against Women Act. It's not just for women though. This is what it's called. A VAWA, for the most part, VAWAs are for people without status that have abusive, like resident or citizen spouses. However, VAWA is also for parents without status that have abusive U.S. citizen children that are over 21. I see a lot of people coming to me from other attorneys' offices for second opinions about should they spend, sometimes they're charging them like insane amounts of attorney fees for this process too. Should they file this? Should they file basically a VAWA case using their child? The answer to that question is almost always no, because it's almost always not an actual VAWA case. What I mean by that is like there needs to be more than just like I was a moody teenager. It has to be literally like I physically abused my parents. It would help if the cops are called at some point in time too for your case.
Yeah, I think one of the important things to think about VAWA is these are cases for legitimate abuse, whether that's through a spouse or the child to parent. Now, child to parent abuse is very rare. The numbers bear that out. Rare. Extremely rare that is actually the case. And I feel and I know that some people are getting bad advice to file these cases because obviously they can't take the traditional route. We know they don't have the waiver available. So the only way to possibly do this is maybe filing one of these VAWA claims. But filing something like that is not accurate or that you can't prove, there are big risks involved here.
So either like best case scenario in situations like that is you don't meet the burden of proving VAWA, meaning you can't show USCIS. You suffered extreme mental or physical abuse by your child. The worst case scenario here is you have been like some attorney has filed something that is fraudulent for you that is completely made up, and now you're probably being sent to immigration court for deportation, and you have another immigration bar you're barred basically for immigration fraud. So
because we're seeing a lot of these now. Maybe in the past, VAWA was like another process where you could file it. It goes through paperwork. Someone's judging it based on what you filed.
Right.
We're seeing those now set for interviews.
Well, that's the policy now. They changed the policy because this type of fraud and abuse was becoming so rampant, and so many attorneys were trying to do this,
And they still are.
They still are. And it hasn't really seemed to stop. That USCIS now, I think the policy is they are supposed to have actual interviews with you for every VAWA file. So that means you have to go there and keep a story straight for 1-2 hours at a time with a adversarial hearing officer quizzing you about your claims.
Already presuming possible fraud.
Right.
So not only could it lead to your immigration court, but any time on a federal application, immigration or otherwise, if you're found to be filing fraudulent information, that can lead to permanent consequences.
Right.
I mean, no immigration the rest of your life, no status the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I mean, don't do it. It's not just with VAWA, but with anything in immigration, you cannot misrepresent, and you should not represent. Not only is it a federal crime, but it's going to lead to some severe consequences. So be careful out there. I mean, immigration laws can change. Just because you don't have relief now, don't prejudice yourself in the future by just grasping at straws based on bad advice you're getting out there. I mean, that goes with any form of the law, but we're focusing on immigration here, and it's like, it's dangerous. Mm-hmm. Don't do it. No matter what you've heard or seen, it is not good advice. Immigration is onto this. And we know this firsthand by seeing people come to us after the fact, filing these things and saying, can you help me now unwind this mess that I found myself in? And it's difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah. The cleanup is basically like the old saying, the cleanup is always harder than the crime is. So me trying to unring a bell is a lot of times going to be impossible. That's just how things work. You can't do that sometimes.
Thanks for joining us today on The Deposition. I'm attorney Andrew Thomas. Subscribe here for more. We're going to have some very interesting guests and answer your questions every week. See you guys.